Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Definitely Talking podcast. My name is Shanna Groves. I'm also known as Lipreading Mom. Today, to welcome our very special guest, her name is Chelle Wyatt. Let me tell you about Chelle. Chelle is the founder of Hearing Loss Live. It is an educational platform and website focused on communication access and hearing loss awareness. Chelle specializes in lip reading instruction as well as practical strategies for navigating hearing loss in real world settings. Her work centers on advocacy, empowerment, and inclusive communication. And we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to both of our hearts, and that is lip reading. Welcome, Chelle.
Thank you. Yeah, lip reading is definitely a valuable tool, and I wish more people knew about it.
Okay, so now that you brought up the topic of lip reading, we will discuss that in just a moment. But first, why don't you tell us more about your experiences with hearing loss, how you came about actually developing Hearing Loss Live, and all of the work that you do for advocacy.
Okay, well, I've been wearing hearing aids since I think 1991, and I spent the first 17 years of wearing hearing aids not knowing they didn't fix my hearing loss. So I was caught in a lot of typical situations for people with hearing loss, like turn up your hearing aids and are your ears in? And I always felt like there had to be something more. It couldn't just be hearing aids. So when we were I lived in a very small town, so I lived far away from any kind of local support. Luckily, I ran into the Say What Club, and they helped normalize some of my situations with hearing loss. Um, Fast forward, I had a big drop in hearing in 2007, and it affected me. It took me out of the career I thought I'd always be doing. I thought, I was a hairdresser. Hair salons are just incredibly noisy places. And I couldn't cope in that environment anymore with hearing aids alone. And this was before much of the accommodations that we have now. I could probably do it now, but
Yeah.
my heart is into helping people with hearing loss now. When my hearing dropped, I went into the state agency here, the Utah Division of Services of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. And they had a really unique hard of hearing program that included lip reading classes for hard of hearing. So they call it speech reading over there. And then Sam Trikins living with hearing loss classes and more. So I learned to work with my hearing loss and manage my communication. I became able to cope in society again. It took 2 years to get out of that big hearing drop hole.
Mm. I understand. I understand. Do you
And
Do you have a definition that you could give us, or maybe a summary of what the terms lip reading really is? What does that mean?
it's I don't like lip reading the names so much. I don't, I agree with speech reading a little bit more because it encompasses more than the lips. But I don't think both terms truly tell people what we're doing because it involves so much mental gymnastics. And so I think of it more as a holistic approach to communication that uses my hearing, what's left of my hearing, lip reading, hearing aids, other technology. And actually with lip reading, we have to be able to set our stage. So it taught me a lot about self-advocacy and helping people help me. So that's why I went after lip reading.
Lip reading. Okay, so we will use the terms lip reading and speech reading interchangeably, but they both mean the same thing. It's visual communication when someone is speaking to a person who is deaf or hard of hearing. Does that does that sound good to you?
Sounds good to me. Yeah, I go between both or it's whatever.
Hmm. What do you find is easiest for you to understand when you are lip reading or speech reading?
Loaded question. Thank you. I didn't find it easy to begin with. It took a lot of work and repetition to make it second nature. And you'll probably agree, once you teach something, you learn it. I mean, it sinks in, and the repetition is what makes it second nature. But still, it's not foolproof. So I would say it depends on the speaker
Hmm.
and how they talk and if they enunciate. And certain speakers are easier.
You know, I'm also someone who needs that visual communication cue, and I find that people who are very expressive, bubbly, whatever term you want to use, that they seem to be easier for me to understand visually. I can understand their body language and their facial cues, and usually they move their mouths they in somewhat of a way that I can make out some of their speech sounds. But we can't see all speech on the face, right? There are some sounds that are made behind the lips, in the throat, the tongue, the teeth, even nasal sounds. What do you think is most difficult when it comes to lip reading someone?
I had to learn to relax because the more uptight I got, the worse I did. So it was a rule that I kind of made up for myself called wait for it. It takes me about 10 minutes to get the hang, up to 10 minutes, the hang of how people speak, the words they use, get to the way, used to the way they move their mouth. So I think wait for it was one of my first things that help calm me down so I can actually do what I need to do.
I think a lot of that is visual processing, auditory processing, and information processing in the brain. We need that pause after someone has communicated something to us to take in all of those puzzle pieces, if you will. Do you find that certain voices are easier for you to hear, which makes it easier to lip read them? Or are there some voices that are more difficult for you to hear and making lip reading almost impossible?
Yeah, the people who mumble, and they say with hearing loss, oh, it's a sign of hearing loss if you think people are mumbling. But let me tell you, some people really do mumble. And the visual or the what I can do for that is when people move their mouth like this and they have no expression. That's very hard. And I have a neighbor like that who's flat, like you said, when they don't have facial expressions, it doesn't help. So he's very flat. He doesn't move his mouth much. He wears a ball cap over his eyes, so I even lose that part of it. Um, so that's the hard part, trying to lip read them. But I also know that I can pull out my captions on my phone because lip reading doesn't always work on people like that. Um, the other one is people who talk fast because we lose the distinction of syllables, lip shapes actually, and when they talk a million miles an hour.
You mentioned your neighbor who mumbles. Do you have a story that you can share, maybe of trying to understand a close loved one, such as a close friend or family member, and struggling to process what they are saying?
For instance, that neighbor, I can understand him, but it takes a lot of work, a lot of intense focus. So I can hang out with him. I just have to limit my time with him. And that's the hard part is deciding the healthy boundaries of who I'm going to hang out with because they're so hard to understand. I like having hard of hearing friends because one of my hard of hearing friends came over when my neighbor was here and she said, I can't understand him either. And that's a ton of validation right there that it's not just me.
Wow. It's interesting that you talk about meeting people who are hard of hearing and your community. You mentioned your state commission for the deaf hard of hearing, that you've done some work with that commission. You learned how to speech read, a lot of the fundamentals of speech reading through that commission. And you also mentioned the Say What Club. Can you tell me more about that club and how people can find out more about it?
That's a Say What Club, all one word, .org. In the 90s, they were the first ones online, and I found them through a web search just because I thought there had to be something more. And they had email groups back then, and I was on them for a good couple of years then. And then I took a break and pursued other adventures when I felt like I had some kind of, I could manage my hearing loss a little bit better. And then when a hearing dropped again, I went right back to them because they still had the same email list. Now they have a Facebook group. They were daily support for me. Whereas here in Salt Lake City, we have an HLAA chapter that was once a month support. So the Say What Club could give me uh, the empathy for my experiences at the time. And people, I really believe the community helps heal us and keep us active and participating in life, and knowing we're not alone is such a huge relief with the support group.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. And you mentioned HLAA, which for our listeners and viewers, that's the Hearing Loss Association of America. And I'm familiar with it. I know in my area, we at one time had an active chapter. We're looking into that again. But in Salt Lake City, you have an active chapter. How can people get involved with HLAA?
I don't know where all the chapters are, and some do kind of come and go, and some are more active than others. Ours meets every other month here for a social right now. We don't really have meetings, but I recommend going to the HLAA website and looking for a chapter. And a lot of it's online now. The pandemic was a bad thing, but it did take a lot of meetings online and it expands our reach for other people with hearing loss.
For sure. And the Hearing Loss Association of America website is hearingloss.org, if I'm
Yes.
correct on that.
Mhm.
So I'm listing all of these resources so that people who are not familiar with these organizations can look them up after viewing and listening to the podcast.
Mhm.
Okay, so something fun. You and I have known each other through various online communities. You've been very active in Say What Club community. You've reached out to me a number of times to participate on some different activities that I was promoting with the lipreadingmom.com blog. And you also have been very instrumental, I think, in with the Hearing Loss Live network that you have helped establish. Can you tell us more about what is Hearing Loss Live and how did all of that come about?
Hearing Loss Live started with the idea that more people needed help with hearing loss outside of the state of Utah. When I worked for the state agency here, that's for state residents. And I had other people from other states say, we don't have anything like that. So I thought, well, why not start Hearing Loss Live with Julia Stepp? I couldn't do it without her. She's she's the background person, and she directs me very well. So I thought, well, let's just take some lip reading classes and start them online. And it's been pretty hard, as you probably know. People don't recommend lip reading. It almost disappeared when I was in the Say What Club doing social media. We were so thrilled with your blog and your work with lip reading because it showed there was at least a few other people out there trying to get it going because it's so helpful. It
Yeah.
used to be a part of rehabilitation with hearing aids in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then it kind of just stopped and then it nearly disappeared in the 80s.
Hmm.
And you started bringing it back, and now I'm trying to bring more awareness to it.
You know, I'm all about auditory rehabilitation.
Mm.
My hearing loss journey is different than yours, just like everyone's hearing loss story is unique. Mine definitely depended on a lot of visual cues. At the time of my hearing loss diagnosis, I had a newborn child. I was on
Mhm.
maternity leave and was about to return to work full time. And with a hearing loss, and as you know, working in a profession that maybe is not set up to accommodate those of us with hearing loss, we have to learn more about our hearing loss. We have to learn, good communication skills and good self-advocacy skills. And also, I think it's important, and I think you would agree, that having ideal listening environments is really important. If we can control the listening environment, we are more likely to understand what people are saying to us. And listening environment could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. For me, it means a quiet room with a person who has my full attention and there is no background noise. What does that mean for you?
I know that a lot of noise can distract me from my lip reading. So I do know that acoustics affect my hearing devices in a huge way. And if I'm in a restaurant and it's so loud, I start clenching my teeth because my hearing aids are just taking in, it seems like everything but I want, that I accept what I want. And I can't even focus on the person in front of me.
Hmm.
I actually take my hearing aids out at restaurants and the noise level just, and I can feel myself relax and I can focus on the person in front of me again. So I think noise is very distracting. I did not know about auditory training for years. I mean, I know that people with cochlear implants get that benefit and are encouraged to train their ears again. But people with hearing aids, I had never heard of that until I got my hearing aids 3 years ago, and it had a streaming. I could finally stream my whatever I wanted. I did music at first, but I thought I've always wanted to do audiobooks and I wanted to do podcast. And, thank goodness our phones come with built in captions. So
Mhm.
I thought I'm going to try a podcast. And I was following with the captions at first. And then after several days of listening to podcast, I thought I was wandering around doing other things. And I thought, hey, there's really something to this auditory training too.
You're starting to pick up those listening cues, not just the visual cues with the captions. That's how our brain is processing information. I think our brains are so powerful if we stimulate them enough with content, visual content, auditory content, tactile content, sensory content, all kinds of things. We can also overstimulate that as well. But if we don't stimulate that auditory sense in some way by wearing hearing aids, cochlear implants, using assistive technology, then our brain struggles to, you know, reacquire some of those skills that are not being used. It's almost like a muscle. My muscles in the wintertime get very weak. In springtime, I'm like, I need to start walking again. I need to work out again. And the same with my hearing. I go through phases where I'm not interacting with people outside of my work circle or my family very much, and I'm isolating. And the next time I get together outside of my home with a group of people, it's much more difficult for me to process what they're saying if I hadn't been practicing listening in a variety of different settings all along. Do you have any suggestions for our listeners, our viewers who do have hearing loss and they want to begin to advocate for their listening needs, advocate for good communication? What suggestions would you start with?
I'm a firm believer in community, connecting with the hard of hearing community, because they will give you more knowledge and resources typically than our hearing health professionals. And a lot of what I've learned is from other peers, taking and, a little here, a little there, and making it work for me. What works for me may not work for you.
Mm,
We're all the same, but we're also a little bit different. So we don't have to do everything in exactly the same way, but you do have to find what works for you
yeah,
and what makes you comfortable. And
right.
I think auditory training, lip reading, hearing aids, all of that just builds on each other and it gives you more confidence to navigate the hearing world. I do have a few friends who do not wear devices at all, and they're both deaf. I mean, lip readers, and they get by with captions and stuff. So there are some people who do not benefit from devices, but and actually they've been an inspiration to me and my lip reading journey too, because they're socially active. They do everything they want to do. They know how to request captions. They know how to get people to talk to them, and that's what's important is figuring out what you need for communication. You can't just say, "I'm hard hearing. I'm hearing impaired." We need to stop that because there's so little awareness in the population at large about hearing loss and communication needs. So we need to give people instruction, what works best for us. And most of the time they work with us. I
Yeah.
have not had many people say no.
Wow. That's great. I know we have some advocates and hearing helpers listening. in on this podcast that would really appreciate knowing what good communication is like and what they can do to also help their loved one advocate for themselves. Well, we are getting to the end of our podcast time, and this is always the fun little um, fun fact about you, Shelley, or something that you consider your superpower, and maybe something that we haven't discussed today on our call. What would that be about you?
Okay, only one thing comes along, and that's when I was with the Say What Club and I dropped out for other adventures. It's because I went to Burning Man for several years. And because it's so fine, powdery, dusty at that event, I never took my hearing aids. I would leave them at home and keep them safe. I just didn't want to damage hearing aids and have to bring them home and get them cleaned and all of that. And those were some of the nicest, most accommodating people. And all I had to do was tell them, I need you to look at me when talking. And everybody was so great. And it helped me relax more into hearing loss without devices. I met my husband at Burning Man. I met him
Oh,
at night when it was dark.
okay. Burning Man, some people aren't familiar with what that is. Can you share more?
It's a hippie-ish art festival out in the middle of the Nevada desert. Once a year, towards the end of August, beginning of September, around Labor Day. And art cars, art installations, crazy costumes, crazy people, lots of fun. When I met my husband at night, he had this mustache that went over his lip because it was vacation time. And I remember telling him, if you're going to hang around me, you're going to have to trim that mustache.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Oh,
I can't lip read you.
the next morning, I met up with him again. It was well trimmed, and 18 years later, he still keeps it very well trimmed for me.
Oh. It probably makes it more comfortable for you when you're kissing, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Oh, so lots
Shelley,
of
this
fun
has been
fact.
so great, and thank
Uh-huh.
you for being a guest today.
Yeah.
And
Thank you
like
for
I
having
said, we've known each other for a number of years, and we've collaborated on some projects. But you are a first-time podcast guest for Definitely Talking. Thank you for your time
me.
today.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. And for everyone watching, listening, thank you so much. Be tuning in a couple of weeks. We will have another Definitely Talking podcast episode. Until that time, stay well and take care. Thank you.